What if I told you an abandoned theme park could be brought back to life? That's exactly what I'm doing today. We're stepping into what was once a dead theme park, neglected, trashed, and totally forgotten, and I'm going to transform it into my best theme park ever, with immersive groundbreaking attractions and lands. But first, we need to fix this mess. Welcome to Disaster Peaks, a theme park so far gone it's practically a lost cause, unkept, unsafe, and seriously lacking direction. It was the definition of a dead park. But hey, the land is just too good to pass up. The existing rides, they are actually solid. I just need to hire a mechanic and add some block brakes for more capacity. Now, the thing we need to do before adding more rides is fixing what we already have. First up, we're closing half of our park. Why? Because guests will get tired and it will be impossible to keep everything clean here. So we placed the signs not allowing guests to enter. We also closed the railway, though that might have been a mistake, more on that later. But what is going to be the theme of our park? I'm going to build a theme park inspired by the rich culture and history of America. This whole idea is very much inspired by a never-built Disney park, Disney's America. This was a park idealized to be built near Washington. But for a lot of reasons, mainly NIMBYism and some historical concerns, it ended up dooming the project, but that doesn't mean it can't live in our imaginations. We start at the generic entrance section. I'm going to transform this into a classic colonial town, something you might see right around 1776. I'm going for that red brick look, simple, solid and timeless. First off, materials. We're mostly looking at wood and brick. Wood was everywhere because it was easy to get and build with. Think clapboard siding and timber frames. But brick, that was the fancy fireproof upgrade, specifically in wealthier towns. So I'm leaning on red brick here to give that sense of permanence. Now the proportions. Colonial buildings are all about balance, windows and doors all arranged symmetrically, perfect for that. And here's the fun part, Palladian influence. Andrea Palladio was a Renaissance architect that influenced pretty much everything until the 20th century. Palladio believed buildings should reflect harmony found in nature and classical Roman design. So features like doorways, windows and even roof lines are carefully spaced to create a sense of calm, order. This idea also traveled from Italy to England through architectural books and pattern guides, and from there to American colonies, where builders adapted using local materials like wood and brick. That's why colonial houses have centered front doors flanked by evenly spaced windows. For the town hall, I'm pulling directly from Philadelphia's Independence Hall, which uses these Palladian ideas to project civic pride and permanence. I did end up changing it, adding a clock and making it more historical accurate. The first few buildings I usually do get redone cause I'm experimenting with the style. As I build this entrance, I'm focusing on these principles, wood textures, brick patterns, and the precise spacing that gives colonial architecture its grounded feel. This sets the tone for the park, grounding guests in history right from the start. Crossing the bridge, we have our New England themed zone. It fits here perfectly because of the arrow suspended roller coaster, as this type of ride is great because it swings side to side, something we don't see anymore. Aside from the access coaster. The swinging sensation is great for near-miss moments, and we will create them by showcasing the best of New England's architecture. In this section, I'm focusing mostly on residential styles, inspired in part by Cape Cod at Tokyo Disney Sea, which does an amazing job romanticizing this type of coastal village. There's something just very nostalgic about these homes. They've become a visual shorthand for small-town America. You'll see a lot of pitched roof, shingled siding, white trim, and narrow windows, all rooted in practicality. These homes were originally designed to withstand harsh coastal winters, with steep roofs to shed snow and to also serve as an attic. But over time, this style became beloved for its modest charm and nice proportions. though it quickly spread to the whole of America during the 20th century with suburban expansion, and now basically any house looks like a typical Cape Cod mansion. What's interesting is that these houses, originally built by the colonists with limited means, came to define an entire aesthetic of America. That's quite fun. So as I build the section, I'm layering in those classic Cape Cod elements. Tight clusters of houses, narrow winding paths, maybe a little harbor town feeling. It helps create a sense of place, and more importantly, it's a perfect backdrop for the swinging coaster, diving between the rooftops. You can see one of these buildings here is a clear tribute to Aunt Peg's village store, also at Tokyo Disney Sea. The only focal point here is the train station, featuring a large central tower, and also the coaster station features a gunbrel roof. A bit harder to do in Parkitect because it requires more space, but the coaster station is bigger, so it fits better here. Alright, so we explored the rich history of New England. Now let's move to Appalachia, a land that brings to life the rugged beauty and history of America's rural heartland. As you step into this section, you'll be greeted by vernacular wooden architecture inspired by the simple, hard-working buildings you'd find in the Appalachian region. I was inspired by parks like Dollywood and Silver Dollar City, as I wanted to tap into the region's cultural roots. Those parks do a fantastic job capturing the spirit of the mountains and the people who call them home, and that's exactly the vibe I'm going for here. Every theme park has like a western or frontier section, and this park is no exception. We need a settler's village, maybe a place Davy Crockett would have traveled to, but who knows. This area features that dueling coaster. I also added flat rides to attract more guests. So completing this scenario is quite hard and easy. The hard part is keeping the park clean and stopping vandalism. Once you do that, the park rating will increase and more guests will come, which will increase your revenue. But guests in this scenario get tired and then they start vandalizing, lowering the guest rating, and then we lose money and almost go bankrupt, and the cycle repeats. So it can be quite stressful. So if I were to give you guys any advice, maybe do something differently, would be opening the railway, deleting the stations in the sections where you don't have rides, and open a station by the dueling coaster. The railway actually makes money. Also hire an army of janitors or micromanage everything, either by deleting the paths and rebuilding them, or hiring and firing staff. Don't tell that to HR though. So yeah, when the bad times come, you start losing money, it can get a bit stressful. Okay, so let's move beyond the hills and actually use the land we have. On the corner, we'll have an American Southwest theme, specifically Spanish colonial architecture. So we have this B&M Flores coaster. We start with a pretty big lift hill, and something I love about early B&M coasters, a pre-drop section. It's that little dip right after the chain lift before the first real drop. And it's so specific to that era. It wasn't just for style either, it was a smart way to reduce stress on the chain lift and smooth out the pacing right before the main drop. It's a simple element, but also iconic. Anyways, we have a large drop and some turns perfect for laterals before the corkscrew. Also, lesson learned, build the railway before the coasters. Anyways, moving to our little Mission Street section, inspired by colonial Spanish architecture in America, you see, here we have thick adobe or stucco walls that kept the heat out, and the roofs were usually low-pitched, covered in terracotta tiles. In game, I use the pyramid piece since it kinda has that aesthetic. You also see the use of arcades, you know, those long, shaded walkways lined with arches. They provide shelter from sun and rain, but they also create rhythm and structure in the architecture. I incorporated them into the layout to help shape sightlines and define gas circulation paths. I was also influenced by California's Mission Revival movement from the early 20th century, which modernized those older traditions. This gave me flexibility to use newer forms, specifically the coaster station, clearly inspired by churches. I think the idea is best captured by something Michael Eisner said during the opening of Disney's MGM Studios in 1989. Welcome to a Hollywood that never was, and always will be. That same sentiment applies here. What I've built is a version of Spanish colonial architecture that's more idealized, something that exists in our imaginations. You'll see real elements but arranged in a way that's idealized, maybe even cinematic. And even if it's not historically perfect, it works, because it creates a sense of place. And personally, that's my favorite thing about theme parks. You have creative freedom to reimagine the past in a more epic scale. Think Frontierland at Disneyland Paris. And here landscaping isn't just decoration, it's also meant to tell a story. I used olive trees from the Dinos and Dynasties DLC, a nod to the Spanish missions that introduced olives to California centuries ago, pairing them with sequoias from the vanilla game, tying the space to the region's iconic nature heritage. Now let's build our next expansion. We start in the peninsula that will be home to our log flume. The cool thing is that it goes under the water and ends up near the lake, kinda similar to Splash Mountain but in Parkitect. I was experimenting with the terrain trying to create that, but what's going to be the theme here? Well, it's basically New Orleans. And the log flume is inspired not directly by Tiana's Bio-Adventure, but by a never-built Disneyland Paris hotel that wasn't supposed to be a log flume, but I really like this artwork, with the city near the water. The log flume continues past the midway and into the hills of the park. Then comes the cooler part where it drops into a more elaborate bayou scene where we're going to build our own little Port Orleans. Okay, so let's move to the actual architecture of the French Quarter, which was actually quite hard to make in Parkitect. So New Orleans is a very unique city, shaped by three different empires: France, Spain and America. France founded the city with a very orthogonal plan, and the buildings also follow that design. Few examples actually remain because of a fire, but you would see large steeped roofs, shutters on all the windows because of the climate. One element, however, that stood out were the large galleries or porches that protected from both sunlight and rain. Later on, New Orleans fell into the Spanish throne. The city changed a lot. The use of brick became more common to avoid fires. More importantly was the introduction of a central light court or interior patio or zaguán. New Orleans is hot, humid, so keeping courtyards allows for cross ventilation, daylight shade and protection from direct sun while allowing airflow. I recreated an inner courtyard as well, but inspired by New Orleans Square at Disneyland. Most importantly, it's Spain, not France, who introduced the now iconic raw iron balconies, again fireproofing. Then, after brief French control, Louisiana was sold to America, and we saw the use of industrial materials like cast iron balconies as opposed to rough became more common. Cast iron is moldable, allowing for highly ornate patterns, often mass-produced from catalogs. New Orleans is proof that industry-grade doesn't mean a building must be ugly by nature. But creating this in Parkitect is quite hard, because balconies are not an easy fit in the vanilla game. You do get quarter-piece roofs that can look like balconies, but no off-grid railings. The only ones we get are fences. Since the railings are the most important elements, we'll have to work around them. Here's the plan: make the balconies first and then build the walls with basic shapes and thankfully a new half-arch piece that was introduced in the DLC. A bit complicated but very much doable. I will also sprinkle in some other building types, creating more diversity, which in theme parks is more important, creating a sense of immersion. I also built a central plaza, quite common in New Orleans, but here was actually influenced by Port Orleans, one of Disney's best hotels ever made, with beautiful landscaping and clever architecture. Now, just to be clear, New Orleans actually sits between Mission Bay and Appalachia, but because New Orleans was technically hard to build, I left it as an expansion, and also from a gameplay perspective, a log flume is not going to help me achieve the goals. Anyways, we were able to clean the park by hiring an army of janitors and security guards, and with that we increased the park rating, which in turn had an increase in guest attendance, and with more guests at the turnstiles we made more money. helping me pay my loan. And with that, we were able to achieve our goals and complete the scenario. But the work was not done. Thankfully, when we complete a scenario, it moves into sandbox mode, unlocking mods and a new cheat menu. Now let's move to Big City, USA. This land was inspired by Tokyo Disney, so again, I'm going to have this amalgamation of American cities like New York, Chicago, and even a bit of San Francisco. Again, a place that never was and always will be. And speaking of that, like Tokyo Disney Sea, the timeline here is the 1920s. So the design here started with the railway. I wanted an elevated railway transition, so here we have it. And something that is really cool, in sandbox mode, I thought I could use the new cheat mode that was implemented in the last update, which is quite cool. You can give yourself money, gas, or even better, build outside the park boundaries, or in our case, disable track collision. So by disabling track collision, I was able to do this vanilla track switch thing, giving the illusion that this is a real urban railway. Also, since this is American City, we have that typical American rectangular grid. I also designed a waterfront, adding lamp posts and benches, and by using a technique where we bury the fences, we can subdivide large pathways so guests don't walk between them, allowing us to place lamp posts while giving the illusion of a continuous path. Quite an ingenious solution, if I do say so myself. But theme parks aren't just pathways, or else they will be pretty boring, so we need a mini central park like Plaza. I was again inspired by Tokyo Disney Sea with one of those walk-through dry deck fountains. We can see I used the water jet piece. Not only that, with the controller we can synchronize them, creating a dance. Actually, they are, in my mind at least, a creative expression of Bach's Prelude 1. As you might know, big architects are usually failed musicians, and successful musicians are usually failed architects or engineers. Hence why I know a bit of music. Anyways, then I move on creating the train station. And no better inspiration than the Pennsylvania station in New York, which was unfortunately demolished. But it was a masterpiece, Beaux Arts style and inspired by Roman baths of antiquity, with large Doric columns and Diocletian windows. Alright, so let's tour our park. Starting at Independence Bay, we have that classic colonial American town with a town hall and many brick buildings featuring architecture all the way from Williamsburg, Philadelphia, Boston and New York. You see a bit of British, even Dutch colonial influence, creating an eclectic mix of architectural styles that all fit together under the same narrative. I also worked on the waterfront, adding a bit of a harbor area, inspired by Liberty Square at the Magic Kingdom. Then we moved to New England, featuring the classic vernacular architecture and a lot of trees. I also added this lighthouse, which is a mod. The roller coaster here is a classic arrow suspended, and it travels through the land, avoiding the buildings, much like the Big Bad Wolf at Busch Gardens Williamsburg. Then we have Appalachia, a land featuring more rustic architecture and a bit of southern flavor. We have this classic settler's town at the bottom of the hill. We also have this boat dock. It's a tribute to the marina at Port Orleans Riverside. It also features a building very much like this, with two water towers that used to spell Dixie Landings and now spell Port Orleans. This mill here is also a tribute to Riverside, but the actual water wheel is a mod. Architects are lazy. This area features a lot of coasters. We have a mine train, the dueling coaster, a Woody I added later on, just creating more kinetic energy, a bit like lake compounds. Oh, and there's also this train station, a tribute to the one that used to be in Frontierland at the Magic Kingdom before Splash Mountain opened. Then we move to our New Orleans section, with a long log flume ride in the swamp. We also have this antebellum mansion inspired by the Villa Rotunda by Palladio in Italy, one of his most iconic buildings that was pretty much copied by everyone, even in the deepest parts of the American South. And the French Quarter, a mix of Disneyland, New Orleans and everything in between. This was quite a fun challenge and I really liked the end product. Much like New Orleans, we have the waterfront on one side and the bayou on the other. Moving on, we arrive at my personal favorite land, Mission Bay, paying tribute to American Southwest and California. With colonial Spanish architecture, beige buildings and arcades, I think why I ended up liking this area so much is because of the landscaping. These new olive trees are so cool, and they fit so well with the California aesthetic. I also added some sequoia trees to expand that storyline. I used a lot of new pieces from the Dinos and Dynasties, specifically the classical pieces. New arches, windows, they do look really great, and this is also another example of how the Parkitect vanilla themes are just suggestions. You can definitely go beyond them and create a whole new storyline. I also ended up using the new classical roof pieces and they do look really cool, specifically for a central tower. And here we have our Flores roller coaster. Housed within this building here, very much neo-colonial, taking inspiration from churches, but funnily enough, this was mostly inspired by the Orlando train station in Florida. The color scheme is also nice, meant to represent the Sierras, with orangish tones and blue hues. On the other side of the lake, we arrive at Big City, USA. Celebrating engineering marvels, we have a massive skyscraper and a lot of cool architecture. First up is the elevated railway and the side next to the park and the water fountain even features a tribute to the Painted Sisters in San Francisco. You can see different architectural styles, even a bit of Art Deco. We also have the Penn Station and the focal point of this street, but perhaps the bigger winnie is the skyscraper, much inspired by the Singer building in New York, also lost architecture. But you know what's even cooler? If a roller coaster launched through the building. That's right, I built this cheetah hunt inspired coaster, probably manufactured by Intamin, and it launches through the building before doing some cool elements around the land. I love roller coasters that travel through the land. I do have to confess that to make the roller coaster actually fit, I cheat by using the new cheat menu in sandbox mode that allows you to build beyond park boundaries. It's a very cool feature, one that I want to experiment more with, because with Parkitect you get some cool scenarios but sometimes you do feel landlocked, which is cool, it's part of the challenge. But now I can go back to some older parks and build beyond the burn. The only limit is your imagination and well, free time. So there we have it, folks, turning this disaster of a park that was filled with trash into my most successful park in Parkitect, with groundbreaking theming celebrating the rich history of America. This was one of my favorite scenarios, but I personally cannot wait to see where our next adventure takes us.